Mr. O'Flynn for 2 minutes and a half.
Thank you. The European Solidarity Corps is a scheme dreamt up by Mr. Juncker immediately after the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. In his State of the Union speech 2 years ago, Mr. Juncker admitted the EU was at a low ebb and sprayed around half-baked ideas for new programmes in the manner of an out-of-control machine gun. 2 years on, one would have hoped that cooler heads would have prevailed, because this is a knee-jerk idea that will not achieve the purpose for which it was devised, which is boosting levels of European consciousness in member nations. But it certainly will risk unfairly crowding out the many excellent youth volunteer schemes that already exist within those nations, and at a cost to European taxpayers running into hundreds of millions of euros. In my own country, the National Citizen Service and the world-renowned Duke of Edinburgh Awards scheme stand to suffer unfair EU subsidised competition. Perhaps one could coin the phrase solidarity dumping to describe the phenomenon. I would also like to sound a note of caution about one of the main activities that was envisaged for this scheme, namely to have young idealistic Europeans working to assist newly arrived asylum seekers, who are overwhelmingly young men from societies riddled with violence and in which core European values such as gender equality are not well observed. The risks entailed in having untrained European teenagers working in proximity with often traumatised new arrivals should be obvious. Another weakness of the Corps is it threatens entirely to smother two pre-existing smaller schemes, namely the European Voluntary Service and EU Aid Volunteers. In the autumn of 2016, a Commission that felt humiliated by the Brexit vote and alarmed by a public backlash against its approach on immigration and asylum decided to make up programmes on the hoof. It would actually send out a message that Mr. Juncker has calmed himself and is no longer in such a blind panic were he now to pull the plug on this folly. After all, polling evidence indicates that it is not starry-eyed school leavers who have lost faith in the EU, but rather their more experienced and worldly wise parents after many years of suffering Commission power grabs that undermine their quality of life, particularly in the fields of monetary policy and migration. This scheme was always more about propaganda than public spiritedness, and it should be scrapped.